Let me tell you about my city. It's wild gritty.
Welcome into another episode of The Change-Up on WOAY Sports. I'm Matt Digby, joined by Tom Beal. A big night in sports, as you can see from Tom's headwear. The Boston Red Sox opening postseason play against the Cleveland Indians. A rematch from last time the Indians made the divisional series. The Indians beat the Yankees in that 07 divisional series, but they met each other in that championship series. But I think it's going to be a good series between the Red Sox and Tribe.
Yeah, and let's remember how that year ended up playing out, too, with J.D. Drew with the big $70 million grand slam in Game 7, and then the Red Sox go on to sweep the Rockies in that 07 World Series. So hopefully we'll go ahead and do that again. Rick Porcello on the mound tonight. So
and I got to ask, I'm trying to remember, because that Game 7, Ryan Garco came how close to the grand slam? Wasn't it J.D. Drew who had that saving catch?
Yeah, J.D. Drew, over his 5 years with the Red Sox, I think it had to be like 6 or 7, but he didn't do a whole lot. Missed a lot of games with knacking injuries and whatnot, but that year he came up huge for us with a couple of big plays, that grand slam being one of them, and then a couple defensive effort plays as well. So he made his money there.
Absolutely. We'll get into Major League Baseball talk later on in the show. Also, some big news in high school. Wyoming East Golf winning the state championship up in the Wheeling. That's one state championship already for Southern West Virginia in the 2016-2017 school year. And we're also talking college football, specifically Marshall. They open Conference USA play this weekend, and we bring in now our good friend from the Beckley Register-Herald, the sports editor, Gary Fauber. Gary, welcome to the Change-Up, buddy.
Hey, good morning, guys. How are y'all doing?
We're doing good. First off, going back to Wyoming East, like we mentioned already, only a couple months into the new school year, and our area, we can already claim a state champion. How exciting is that?
Yeah, it's great. Anytime that we have teams in this area who are doing well, that's a good thing. And Wyoming East, it really doesn't matter what sport they play. They seem like they excel in everything they do. They've only been open since '99. They've already got a football state championship. I think 2 or 3 basketball championships, plus the girls team won last year, and 1 baseball title, and now they add golf to it. Athletics are obviously a big important thing in Wyoming County, and they definitely should be proud of themselves for what they've been able to accomplish.
So Gary, I know Matt's a big golfer. Do you get out there on the links at all?
I have not played golf in 12 years. And when I played, I looked like I hadn't been playing in 12 years. So, I have to stick to the miniature golf and then work my way up.
All right. Well, obviously great news to Wyoming East. Congrats to head coach Doc Warner. His team, Brett Laxton, was the medalist. He had the lowest score among all Class AA golfers with 151, and he definitely deserves a lot of credit for his hard work in the sport. Definitely our congratulations to them. Moving on now, the big topic, I guess, this week would be Marshall football. WVU does have the weekend off, so Marshall has a chance to kind of get back on track. First off, Gary, the fact that Marshall has non-conference play in the books didn't quite go as expected for them. You and I and Tom have seen them a couple of times already, either at the Joan or just watching on TV when they're on the road. What's your makeup of the team right now? I know it's still kind of in a transition period. Chase Litton, still kind of adjusting to some growing pains as his first full year as a starting quarterback.
Yeah, this the first 25% of this season it's been so just really just weird for Marshall. I think. The first game against Oregon State. To me that was no more than a scrimmage game. They're an FCS team. They were really a bad FCS team as well, and Marshall was just able to do whatever they wanted to in that game. And I don't think that they got really an accurate gauge of what they were capable of doing, or what they needed to improve on, and things like that, like you normally do in the first week of the season. And I don't think they were prepared for Akron the next week. I know Akron's not they're not a Power 5, but they have a lot of talent on that team, a lot of speed, and I think they came in there and really surprised Marshall, and Marshall wasn't ready for it, and it just kind of snowballed. And Chase Litton, they're talking about an undisclosed injury that caused him to miss the Louisville game, but there's all kinds of speculation that he suffered a concussion in that Akron game when he took that sack and fumbled, and they returned for a touchdown. He wasn't really the same the rest of that game. So you go to the Louisville game, and not only are they Louisville, but you're going against them with a true freshman quarterback making his first start. So you're behind the eight ball, obviously, right from the start. So it's hard to gauge anything really, I think, from that game too. And then you go into the Pitt game, and they just did not play well at all in the first half. They had 7 rushing yards in the first half, fell behind 27-0. You're thinking, well, here we go. And all of a sudden, second half, they score on the opening drive, and then they get that just a perfectly executed onside kick and score off that. And all of a sudden, the lead's cut in half, and end up getting a 30-27 and fall just a little bit short in their comeback. To me, I think the Marshall that we saw in the second half is the Marshall I want to see the rest of the year. And Chase Litton, I think, is a good quarterback, and I think he needed a half maybe to get his feet under him a little bit in the Pitt game. They played well in the second half, and start Conference USA play this week. I think they're going to be fine.
So Gary, I want to go back to that Akron game for a second, because to me that was a pretty winnable game. They were leading 21-7 at one point, and then the defense kind of just fell apart, and they obviously had some offensive line issues and things like that as well. But if they win that game, I mean, obviously going into having Louisville come in with Lamar Jackson being one of the best players in the country, that was probably a game that they weren't going to win in most scenarios. But if they win that game and they're 2-1 or 2-0 heading into the Louisville game, how much of a difference do you think that makes against a team like Pitt, as far as morale and as far as just establishing some momentum heading into their conference schedule?
Yeah, it probably does. I mean, because of the way things did unfold, there had to have been some doubt maybe going to that Pitt game, and just maybe being unsure of what was going on, within themselves. So yeah, I think you're probably right. They probably would have done a world of good to be in the opposite situation, being 2-1 instead of 1-2, and so the important thing is they did get it turned around in the second half against Pitt, and I think that I really do think that what you saw in the second half in that game is what we're going to see the rest of the year.
Yeah, but at the same time, though, it always seems that any game against MAC opponent, especially with Marshall, because they used to be in the Mid-American Conference, it almost is like a trap game. I mean, we've seen this against Ohio over the years. We saw it last year on the road at Kent State, that game going to double overtime. What is it about the mentality that obviously, if you were to ask Doc Holliday, they'd say they take every team seriously, but is that the case where they do take every team seriously, or were they thinking it was just going to be another outcome like Morgan State?
Right. I think it's a combination of, a couple of things. Like you said, Doc Holliday, he'll tell you that they take every opponent seriously, take it week by week. But, you're dealing with, 21, 22-year-old kids, whatever. You're going to, I think it's human nature. I don't think, in situations like that, I think you can, underestimate an opponent, and the next thing you know, you're on the losing end of it. Marshall has not played MAC teams well at all, like you said, since they joined Conference USA in 2005. And I think one of the other things is I think a lot of the MAC teams really get up for Marshall. They want to come want to prove something. Even 11 years later, they want to prove that hey, you guys are you shouldn't have left. We're a good conference too. And so I think the opponents they face out of the MAC get geared up and are ready for them every time they play.
So 1-3 can be kind of a demoralizing start for a college program, but based on your experience, covering this team under the Doc Holliday regime, and they're heading into conference play, how likely is it that they can kind of turn things around, or do you think that that morale and things at this point are so low that this season's maybe almost lost for them at this point?
No, I don't think so. I think they'll get it turned around. I think a big reason for that is Chase Litton. He's only a sophomore. He's a true freshman starter last year, but his maturity is just something that jumps off the page. Even when he made his first start against Norfolk State last year, and in the post-game press conference, that really jumped out to me. You get true freshmen there sometimes, and they kind of don't know what to say, and he had all the right answers. It looked like he had been there, like Rakeem Cato had never left, as far as maturity and everything. He just stepped right in, and you could tell that he was going to be a leader, and I think he will lead this team. And once they get North Texas this week. I think it's going to start. I think it's going to be fine.
Yeah, and speaking of North Texas, that is where the Herd is this week, traveling to the Mean Green. They are a team, North Texas, that hasn't necessarily really seriously contended in Conference USA's West Division. Is this kind of like the perfect conference opener for the Thundering Herd, would you say?
We'll see. They're a little bit better already than what they were last year. They've won 2 games, which is twice as good as they won last year. And Marshall, traditionally since they joined CUSA, they've not played well in the state of Texas. So, this could be, I don't think it's going to be anything that's going to come easy as it might look on paper. North Texas has a new head coach. They've really just basically started from scratch, running a different offense, have a freshman quarterback in Mason Fine, who's doing a good job for them. He's a guy that Doc Holliday was saying earlier this week. He can beat you with his feet, and he makes good throws on the run. So they're going to have definitely a challenge this week, in the state of Texas. And Marshall, on paper, probably should win this game, but like I said, they've not played well in the Lone Star State. So we'll see how it goes.
So, given the importance of this game, what's the biggest key that you'd be looking for Marshall coming out of the gate against North Texas?
Really, I think they got Doc always like to establish a run, and I think that's a big thing that need to, establish the run offensively, and they need to stop the run on defense. That's kind of what they get predicated on. It opens things up, obviously, and if they can do that, then I think it'll be fun.
Yeah. Do you see at all, for any reason, them wanting to go trick plays, specifically putting Garrett Morrell in for a couple of plays? Because we take a look at how he did against Louisville. I mean, 59 yards, 2 touchdown passes, not necessarily the best stat-wise, but I mean, it was a very tough situation for him. And all things considered, you could say Garrett performed fairly admirably.
Yeah, I thought he did really well, considering, like you said, it was kind of slow going, but the second half he kind of warmed up the things a little bit and got better. As far as maybe running trick plays and everything, Doc doesn't really have a history of doing things like that, but that's why they call them trick plays. You don't see them coming, so maybe they can do that and catch North Texas off guard.
How much time did Garrett actually have to prepare for that start against Louisville? Because, I mean, going back to the Akron game, in the post-game press conference when Litton was speaking, in retrospect, it seems now you could kind of tell that maybe he was, not quite right after that game, but I wasn't really sure in the moment, but it did seem like, he was suffering some effects from that big hit earlier in the game. But I don't think they made the announcement until pretty close to game time. How much, from your understanding, how much time did Morrell actually have to prepare for that start?
Yeah, I think Doc said after the Louisville game that actually on Tuesday of game week they that's when they told Garrett that he was going to get the start, and Chase didn't even practice that week, and so he was groomed throughout the whole week starting on that Tuesday. So you had a little bit of time to get ready, but there's a big difference between getting ready for Norfolk State and getting ready for number 3 in the country.
Yeah, that was something I was definitely speaking with the other photographers down on field level. But at the same time, moving over to a more positive topic, the standout play of 2 former Beckley Flying Eagles for Marshall, Clint Van Horn, the offensive lineman, and Chase Hancock, the starting linebacker, who actually had a sack that forced Louisville to punt on their opening drive. What a year those 2 have had, and they were very rightfully rewarded with being named game captains for the Pitt game.
Yeah, it's been really great to see. They both have similar paths. I mean, when Van Horn got in there, he was an invited walk-on and worked his way up into the starting lineup, and then he's had multiple weeks as a captain. He's captain again this week, and he's been really a great success story for what he's been able to do. And then you got to Chase. He was a invited walk-on 2 years ago, and really worked hard. Last spring he was working with the with the number 1 team at linebacker, and got himself into some special teams play throughout last season. Got some defensive play as well, and just really kept working hard. And he was rewarded this year with a starting role. He and Clint were not just 2 Beckley, Woodrow Wilson guys in the starting lineup. They were the only 2 West Virginia natives in the starting lineup on either side of the ball. So that's a great accomplishment for those guys, and something that the city of Beckley can hang his hat on a little bit. It just continues the success that Woodrow Wilson players have had at Marshall in the past. There's not just those two, but Doug Legurski played in the NFL, Shavar Greer, Matt Morris. Even before them, Chris Gross was on the 1992 Division I-A National Championship team, and Mike Gilliams was offensive lineman on the 99 team that went undefeated and finished number 10 in the country. So, city of Beckley, Woodrow Wilson has had a pipeline, from here to Huntington, and I know Doc has said he'd like to see it continue.
Gary, I know, I'm assuming that you covered both of those guys when they were at Woodrow Wilson. Did you see this type of potential in them when they were playing for the Flying Eagles?
Yeah, maybe Clint, just because his size, and he was kind of fast. He, to be as big as he was. Chase, I wasn't sure of. I'm definitely no expert on judging talent, but he was. I just didn't know. I didn't know I didn't get to see him as much as maybe I did Clint. From week to week, but it's just been amazing what he. I think there were 3 area players who walked on the same year that he walked on, and maybe 4, and he's the only one left standing. And that's just a testament to the hard work that he's put in, and earned that. Not only got a job, got a starting job, but he got he was put on scholarship in January. So it's just been one success after another for him, and I'm happy for both of them.
Yeah, we are very happy for them as well. Really quickly, before we move over to baseball, do you think Marshall gets the win to open Conference USA play this weekend?
Yeah, I do. I think they'll come out and they're going to be ready. And like I said, it's going to be a challenge for them. Playing in the state of Texas, they just have not played well there. But in the end, I think they get that win, and there'll be kind of Marshall fans can breathe a sigh of relief a little bit, and then they'll move on. And got a couple of tough ones in the Conference USA obviously down the road, but that would be a good start for them, I think.
Yeah, absolutely. If they can get a win this weekend, and then the following week against Florida Atlantic back at Huntington on October 15th, that would definitely put them in a much better mood than they must be right now. But moving on, start of Major League Baseball playoffs. What a wild 2 wild card games we had last night. I mean, it's a reason they're called the wild card games, and we were quite entertained, quite honestly, to be honest.
Yeah, I mean that's why we have the wild card to keep excitement going throughout the season. And then you get into these one-game deals. I know a lot of people don't like them, but they do bring excitement. I guess obviously a must-win situation for both teams involved. And what a great game it was. 2 nights ago when Toronto beat Baltimore. When Encarnacion hit about a 500-foot home run to walk off, and then last night. Madison Bumgarner just doing what he's done every other year since 2010. So it's going to be a fun series between the Giants and the Cubs, I think, and then Rangers and Blue Jays kind of rematch.
So I get the whole excitement of the one-game wild card, but from where I'm sitting, having a one game to determine who's the better team to move on in baseball is kind of ridiculous because you play 162 games, and the whole point of that is that there's so much variance in one single game of baseball that you need such a large sample size in order to truly determine who the better team is. So do you think it would make sense if instead of having the one-game play-in, expanding the playoffs to 6 teams and then maybe giving the top 2 division winners a first-round bye and kind of doing it like they do in the NFL as far as playoffs to kind of make it a real series for these wild card teams and actually get a chance to determine who's the better team, not just who can roll out the better starting pitcher that night?
Yeah, I mean, you're 100% right. It's baseball is a game where, last night was a perfect example. The Mets closer, gave up a 3-run home run. I think he only gave up 1 home run all season, and then then Gordy gives up the home run in the 9th inning last night, and that's just baseball is a game. You can't play one game and decide who's the best team. You need a series. There's so many different things that can change throughout a game, and there needs something needs to be done to give teams a better opportunity to play. I mean, the Cubs could go out there and one game and play the Twins or something like that, and we'll lose. And does that cheapen their season? No,
right.
But you just something there needs to be some kind of change, and I would personally I'd like to see them shorten the regular season. and then maybe play a best of 5 in the wild card, and then go to 7 in the in the LCS and the World Series.
Yeah, and the other thing I saw this past week as the regular season came to a close, example, the Indians and Tigers, they were not able to finish their series to completion because of rain in Detroit, and they were wondering if they were going to have to play on Monday just for the sake of not just finishing the series, but also the fact that at the time Detroit was still with an outside shot at getting into the wild card. As it turned out, that turned out to be inconsequential. But does that kind of having a shorter season, I would argue it definitely takes that controversy potentially out of the equation completely.
I would think so. Yeah, definitely. And I don't know. They're just baseball. Major League Baseball is not perfect, but it's just something that's it's just enjoyable to watch. That I enjoy. It's my favorite sport, and just enjoy this postseason. It's been exciting so far, like you guys said.
What's your thoughts on Rob Manfred, how he's done his job so far as commissioner? It's his second season stepping in for Bud Selig. We've had so many instances, especially here in high school sports, where you have someone succeeding a legend. And, I mean, for all intents and purposes, in terms of baseball commissioners, you can certainly put Bud Selig in the legend category. What would you say about evaluating how Rob Manfred has done his job as commissioner over the past 2 seasons?
Yeah, I think he's doing a good job. I know he's looked at a lot of things, and playoff. Like we were talking about playoff. Setup as far as the wild cards and things like that is something he's approached. I mean, nothing's been finished as far as changes or anything like that. But he does seem to be. He definitely seems to have baseball's best interest in mind. And on a personal note, I like to see him. Lift the ban on Pete Rose and be able to get him in the Hall of Fame, but that's probably not going to happen. But I think he's doing a good job.
Yeah, the one thing I like about Rob Manfred is that, similar to Adam Silver, they both seem interested in kind of progressing the game into this century and kind of bringing things up to date, and they do that by really listening to the players' opinions and different people's opinions, and not just being beholden to the owners. And they really seem interested in what do we need to do to make the game relevant and keep the game relevant as we move forward here. But, nonetheless, we've got some great series here in this first week. The Red Sox and Indians get going tonight in the ALDS. Last season for Big Papi, a lot of narrative motivation for the Red Sox to get it done for him. And tonight they send Rick Porcello, their 23-game winner, to the mound. What are your thoughts on that series with Cleveland?
Yeah, I think the Red Sox will come out of that in probably about 6 games. Like you said, the motivation for winning for David Ortiz is going to be a big thing for them. But that doesn't take away from the fact they're a very, very talented team, good pitching, and got some sticks also. So I think they win it in 6. And you'll certainly be happy about that.
Yeah, I know Tom will be. It's been a great season, though, for the Indians. I mean, just still thinking of the possibility of an Indians-Cubs World Series. I mean, that would be
almost as good as the Red Sox-Cubs World Series.
Exactly. Well, the Red Sox-Cubs, it would have been excellent back in 2003.
2003 was the year. Yeah, we were this close. It should have happened.
Grady should have pulled Pedro earlier, I'm telling you.
Bartman shouldn't have reached for that foul ball. That was the 2 things we would have had it.
Yeah, absolutely. But other series going on starting on Thursday, the Blue Jays and the Rangers. I mean, you talk about the entertainment value that series had last year. If it's half as entertaining this year, we're still in for a real treat, wouldn't you say, Gary?
I would think so. We'll see if Jose Bautista's charges in a second any harder than what he did earlier this season. Takes one to the chin, but that's gonna be an entertaining series. The Blue Jays just absolutely mashed the ball, and the Rangers. Have it going from all angles. So I think I'm picking the Rangers in 5 in that one.
Yeah, and over to the National League, those 2 series start on Friday with the Dodgers and Nationals, 2 clubs that have done well in terms of getting to the playoffs the past few years, but going out very quickly in the divisional series. But now that they're playing each other, one of them has to go to the championship series, so that's going to be very exciting.
Yeah, the Nationals kind of go in with a disadvantage. Got some key injuries on that team. The Dodgers are have kind of quietly played well all season. So I think they'll win it at 5.
So a lot of people love to buy into this narrative of it's an even year, so the Giants are going to win the World Series. But I mean, now they have to go face the Cubs, and because of this one-game wild card, they're only going to get to use Madison Gardner probably one time in this divisional series. And the Cubs obviously been the best team in baseball all season long. Their offense is unbelievable. They have a great pitching staff. Is there any chance the Giants can get through?
I think there's a chance. A lot of times the favorite doesn't always win. Then when you go through all season and things just don't happen in the playoffs, they're away for some reason. But I think as far as the even year thing, I think that ends this year. I think the Cubs will get them. Like you said, they're only going to be able to use Bumgarner once, probably, unless they try to bring him in on 12 hours rest or something like that. But I think the Cubs win this one. They may sweep this one.
Yeah. Do you think we might see Bruce Bochy do what he did in Game 7 of the World Series 2 years ago, bring on Bumgarner as a reliever and basically have him pitch a good 6-7 innings?
Yeah, I think so, yeah.
Yeah, I think anytime you get an elimination scenario, you got to pull out all the stops and do what you got to do to get the win. So if you had to pick a World Series guy right now, Gary, who do you got?
You know what I'm going to pick? I'm going with the Cubs.
All right.
In the American League. Wow.
That curse. It's a long-standing curse.
Let's go and pick the Red Sox.
That'd be good. I mean, personally, it'd be good to see the Cubs and that curse of the Billy go. I mean,
if there's one team I would like to see other than the Red Sox win, it's got to be the Cubs. I've always had a soft spot for the Cubs, because of that shared championship drought that we had for so many years. Mm-hmm. Red Sox fans have a certain sympathy for Cubs fans in that regard, so it would be nice to see them get the win, if not the Red Sox. So I'm looking forward to it. It should be fun no matter what. We have a lot of good teams in this postseason this year.
We really do, and one thing I'm personally excited for, not necessarily the fact that Kansas City is not in the postseason this year, but I always love to see a different team. If it's a sport like Major League Baseball where I don't have a set favorite team that I follow day in, day out, I always like to see some kind of parity between the two teams, and that's what I enjoyed about Kansas City's run the past 2 years to the World Series, and now I'm going to be really excited about this postseason.
And to me, Kansas City is one of those, they win these games, but they're not always the most exciting team to watch, because they play a lot of that small ball, move the runner over, and just make contact stuff. The thing I like about the teams that are in the postseason this year is a lot of power pitching and it's a lot of power hitting, especially in the American League, some real big bats, and I think that just always makes for more exciting games. So I think hopefully this will drive the ratings up because that's something that baseball needs desperately in its postseason. They've been struggling to even outdo the Thursday night football numbers. And it'll be interesting to see tonight what the numbers are for that ALDS game versus Thursday night football.
Yeah, is that something you're more of a fan of, Gary? Big hitting 10-9 final scores, or are you a fan of pitchers' duels?
Oh, yeah, pitchers' duels, without a doubt. I love 1-0, 2-1 games. It's more fun. Offense, I don't mind offense, but you reach a certain point where it gets a little ridiculous. But I do like the pitching duels. They're a lot more fun to watch, and as a writer, they're more fun to cover too.
Yeah, absolutely. We had quite a few pitchers duels in high school this past season, and a lot of them are coming back. Notably, Michael Mayola, he did very well for Woodrow Wilson. If he is still with Woodrow Wilson this spring, I think he can do very well with the Flying Eagles. But final thoughts, you're going to be at the game, I'm assuming, a couple weeks against Florida Atlantic between Marshall and the Owls?
Yes, I will be there, and important to note, Garen Justice used to be at Concord, is now an offensive line coach, I think, with FAU. So it'll be kind of coming home for him. It'll be a nice little story aside for them.
That is right. I forgot to mention that. Yeah, it's going to be great to see Garen again. Hopefully we'll get the chance to catch up pre-game or post-game. But
I'm just looking forward to it, man.
Absolutely.
It's good football. This is a fun time of year. It's the only time of year we have all four major sports in action at the same time, during October. So it's a lot of great sports going on this time of year. It's really exciting. Yeah,
well, Gary, thanks for coming on the program. We really appreciate your time, and I'm sure Tom and I will be seeing you. Which high school game you headed to this week?
I'm going to be the field general in the office this week, so I'll be sending out the other guys to do the damage.
All righty. Well, we look forward to seeing all your updates, and we'll be providing updates from our games as well.
Of course.
And we'll definitely be seeing you in the very near future. Again, thanks for coming on, Gary. Appreciate it, and we'll talk to you soon.
Hey, thanks for having me, guys. Y'all take care.
Thank you.
Absolutely. You as well. That was Gary Fauber from the Beckley Register-Herald, and he does a lot of coverage as the sports editor. Notably, he does a lot of baseball beat, high school. That's kind of his beat. He was the Miners beat writer. He also does Marshall. But, yeah, in general, going back to baseball, again, it's wide open in terms of, the sentimental favorites are still there, but in terms of actual talent, if the Giants can continue this momentum, particularly what they had last night against the Mets.
I mean, there's really not a weak team in the postseason. You just look all across the board. The American League, the Indians pitching, and the brains of Terry Francona. That always makes them a tough out. The Red Sox, led the league in runs scored this year, and their pitching has been much better as of late. Still a bit of a question mark. The Rangers and Blue Jays can hit the crap out of the ball. And then over in the National League, such great pitching across the board with the Dodgers. The Nationals, obviously, it seems like everyone on their staff can pitch really well. And the Giants, this time of year, they're just that team. And I don't know what it is about even years, but something in the water out there in San Francisco. They're able to have success. And then they run into the best team all year in the Cubs, who have just all over the field have been outstanding, from Anthony Rizzo to Chris Bryant to their pitching staff. Kyle Hendricks leading the league in ERA this year. So there's not a weak spot in the entire postseason. It's really exciting. Yeah,
one other thing we haven't mentioned yet that I'll bring up to Gary just to get his opinion on it when we see him next. The fact that Friday, all 4 games are in action. We have games at 1, at 4, at 5, at 9. What's your take on that? A, having all 8 teams in action on the same day, and B, having an afternoon game. I mean, yeah, it is Friday, it is the weekend. A lot of people take off early already. But in general, just having a day game, even if it is a playoff game.
I mean, I'd love it if we were able to watch them all. We're going to have a whole bunch of other stuff going on. We won't be able to check those games out. But you know what? I like it because I think you're right. Like on a Friday afternoon, and people, especially the fans of those teams, people are going to be motivated to, get out of work early or whatever it is. Just tune in, watch their teams. And I think it's something that, baseball needs to do. They need to get creative in ways that they get people to tune into these games and get people excited about playoff baseball. And, that's the one thing you hear about. Well, the TV revenues keep going up with the local TV contracts. But overall, the game is losing market share to, of course, football, but even other sports coming up. You look at soccer, and then even something like esports, between the demographics of 12 to 17, kind of that age range. There are more people watching esports right now, which is kind of a new phenomenon, which I know almost nothing about, but that's starting to take over a larger market share than baseball. So you got to be a little bit worried. And baseball, it's a game where if you didn't play it growing up, if you don't have a deep understanding of what it is and you're just watching a game casually, sometimes it can seem a little boring. So I think that they need to, continue to look at ways to increase pace of play, to get more runs scored, and just find ways to bring more excitement, whether that's personalities like a Bryce Harper, and just, do certain things to make the game fun again. I'll give Rob Manfred credit, though, because I think he is, he's putting in a lot of effort to make that happen, and I think that he's been good for the game of baseball, and he'll continue to be good for the game of baseball.
I think he is, too, although I think the big thing, not to say this will make or break his legacy, but more or less, is he going to be the guy that lifts the lifetime ban currently on Pete Rose? Personally, I would also like to see that happen.
I hope so, and there's some red tape behind it because you want to be careful setting precedents like that when a commissioner hands down a lifetime ban and being able to respect that. But just looking at the facts of the case, I think it's kind of silly when the guy who has the most hits ever in the major leagues isn't in your Hall of Fame. Regardless of what he may have done as a manager kind of outside the game of baseball, going out and betting. Yes, it was wrong. There's guys in the Hall of Fame that have done much worse things, and it wasn't like he was betting against his own teams. And just the Hall of Fame isn't necessarily a morality Hall of Fame. I know that we like to, put guys in who were good, who didn't cheat, didn't use steroids and things like that. But to be honest, we don't know what half the guys did, especially if you go way back into like the Ty Cobb days. We don't know what kind of things they were doing. They didn't have really strong drug testing back then. We don't know what those guys were up to. And a lot of them, Babe Ruth, for example, weren't necessarily the nicest of guys. So if you start to make it a strictly morality Hall of Fame, it's really tough to kind of draw those lines in the sand. And I think that, Pete Rose, one of the greatest to ever do it. I think he's just got to be in the Hall of Fame.
Well, going off your argument about the whole morality issue, it's the same deal with the NFL, because the NFL Hall of Fame is so strict about you have to consider on-field accomplishments. If O.J. wasn't already elected to the Hall of Fame, what happened in the mid-'90s technically should not have an impact on his Hall worthiness. But that's a discussion for another day. I'm sure we'll
it's a little bit of a different story.
Absolutely. But we'll take a quick break. Coming up next, we'll recap more local sports. Got a big weekend of college football. Again, West Virginia does have the weekend off, but there are several teams in the area in action. Also, we'll talk some high school sports as golf, their season has wrapped up. Volleyball and soccer, they're coming up on sectionals and regionals. And only 5 weeks left of high school football. We'll mention that in the second block of our program. We'll take a quick break. See you right after this. This is The Change Up on WOAY Sports. Welcome back into the Change-Up on WOAY Sports. Matt Digby and Tom Beal. It's week 6 of college football here in the Mountain State. WVU does have the weekend off, but Marshall is on the road to Open Conference USA play at North Texas. We were just talking about that with our friend Gary Fauber of the Beckley Register-Herald, and also another team in action actually tonight is Concord. They're taking part in the Mountain East Conference Game of the Week at UVA Wise. It's a matchup that I think Concord absolutely needs, especially after the tough loss over the weekend to the University of Charleston, because it's a Wise team that, although they are much improved from last year, they still maybe have that mentality that ever since the Mountain East, Concord has won every single game against the Cavaliers. Yeah. So this could be a perfect bounce-back opponent.
Yeah, bounce-back opponent for sure. And it's a short week, so it'll be a little bit tough from that standpoint. But like you said, I think it's absolutely a must-win. You can't afford to fall to 2-4 on the season. And the big key for Concord, we talked about it a little bit on Saturday, stopping the run, which they did not do against Charleston, and penalties, which has been a problem for them all season long. It seems like almost every game they've had more than 10 penalties, and that's been terrible for their defense as far as they force a third down, third and long, and then they get a personal foul or a pass interference or something that extends the drive, and that was a really big factor against Charleston. So they're going to have to clean that up. It's a short week. Paul Price has talked about he's tried punishing guys, cutting playing time, and that's something he's going to continue to do to try to get guys out there on the field who can play disciplined and just do their job and do it the right way. So that's going to be a big factor. And then the run game, as we talked about. 343 yards and 4 scores allowed on the ground to Charleston. That's simply unacceptable. I know they had some injuries to their front seven. We'll see how guys have been able to recover here with the short week, but they really need to go out and get this win.
Yeah, talk about timely scheduling. I was taking a look at the season stats for the Cavaliers team. They do rely more on the pass. Their quarterback, Bryson Lee, has 8 touchdowns, 4 of them really to one guy in particular, James Cousins. That's going to be the big matchup against, we presume, Jeremiah Johnson, who has been having a great year in the secondary, Shadlier Shepard. That's what it's going to come down to, I think, their pass offense against our Concord's pass defense. Yeah,
and the pass defense has been good. The secondary has been really strong, whether it's Jeremiah Johnson, he had the 2 interceptions last week, or you talk about Akil Bordelon, who's had several interceptions this year. They've been playing really well on the defensive side in the secondary, but it's that front seven. If they can get pressure on the quarterback and force some of those bad throws, that'll be a big factor. And then on the offensive side of the ball, they're going to need to be a little more consistent, especially in the passing game. Brian Novak came alive there in the fourth quarter, but the first 3 quarters they put 6 points up on the board. They really had difficulty moving the ball, so they're going to need to be a lot more consistent on that front and kind of control the clock a little bit more and help the defense out by keeping them off the field. I think time of possession was something in the range of 36 minutes for Charleston to 23 for Concord. So that's something that they're going to need to turn around in their favor to really take control of this game.
Absolutely. And again, like we mentioned, it is a Thursday night game, so that's kind of the big positive in a way. You don't have too much time to dwell on that UC loss. I was speaking with Paul Price at his weekly news conference on Wednesday. He said, they've already moved on to the Cavaliers, getting ready to do what they need to do down in Wise, Virginia. It's going to be Wise, I hear, is playing a wideout, so hopefully Concord can experience another tough road atmosphere that will only add to their confidence if they're able to pull out and get the win like they did a couple weeks ago at West Virginia Wesleyan.
Yep, and then you move to 3-3, you're right back at 500. It puts you in a position to close out the season strong, and then hopefully get into the postseason and make some noise there.
Absolutely. So that's set for Thursday night, Concord at UVA Wise. Then moving on to Saturday, there was one weekend last year where the stars kind of aligned. All our area teams were either on the road or off. I think it was the week after in 2015, but it's this weekend in 2016. We mentioned Marshall on the road at North Texas, but Virginia Tech is on the road at North Carolina. That's going to be a big game. Both teams are in the top 25 of the AP poll. Virginia Tech 25th, North Carolina 17th. It's going to be pretty big in terms of redemption factor for the Hokies, because it was North Carolina who happened to be the opposition for Frank Beamer's last home game. Now, the fact that Beamer announced his retirement several weeks in advance of that game at North Carolina, that game was already scheduled back when they made the 2015 schedule back in the spring. So it wasn't just a surprise that it happened to be Beamer's last game. We already knew ahead of time, but I was at that game. Tar Heels, they were for real. They got out to a big lead in the fourth quarter, 24-10. Credit to Virginia Tech for coming back to force overtime, but it always kind of looked in overtime like the Tar Heels were the better team, and they did get the 30-27 win.
Yeah, I think sometimes North Carolina football can get overlooked because of how strong their basketball program is. You don't always think of them as a football school, but they've had a good program, the last several years, and they're definitely not a team to take lightly. We've seen Virginia Tech so far this year. They've played really well at home, a couple of big home wins. Out on the road, there's still a little bit of an unproven, so it'll be a big game for them to go out and get a big road win and hopefully extend their record moving forward here. Luckily, this time they don't have to play in front of 156,000 Tennessee fans out at a NASCAR track, so hopefully that'll be a big difference for them. Gerard Evans has been playing outstanding. He had 4 touchdowns a few weeks ago, one of them on a beautiful 55-yard touchdown run. So hopefully he can keep up his strong play and they can go out there and get the win.
Absolutely. And like you mentioned, coming out, their only other game away from Lane Stadium was that neutral setting in the battle at Bristol. This weekend they'll be at Keenan Stadium in Chapel Hill, which I've been to. It's a very impressive stadium, but it's not 150,000 people. There is a slight difference there.
That's a hostile road atmosphere for sure.
But again, going back to North Carolina, they have had a lot of progress made under Larry Fedora. He joined a couple years ago from Southern Miss. They won their Coastal Division title last year, the first time they made the ACC championship game, and they really gave Clemson a run for the money. If they won, or in another world, they probably should have gotten the New Year's 6 bowl berth.
Yeah, like we said, it's a strong program, and anytime you got a team that makes it into the top 25 and they can go out and compete with a team like Clemson, they're going to be challenged, especially for a fringe 25 team like the Hokies. But I think the Hokies have shown promise this year, and if they can develop a sort of consistency and they can get this win, that could really launch them up in the polls and put them in a really good position for a strong bowl game.
Yeah, that would really give them a great mood going into the rest of the month of October, because they do have, I think, only one home game this month. They are at Syracuse on October 15th. Then they're back at Lane Stadium for a Thursday night game against Miami. Then they're on the road at Pitt for another Thursday night game. So it's going to be very interesting to see where the Hokies are at the end of this month. Also on Saturday, Bluefield College still looking for that first win. They've got to go on the road to Georgetown, another ranked team in the NAIA. It seems we say this every week, but I don't think it's an exaggeration to say that the Mid-South Conference is basically NAIA's version of the SEC when you take a look at the depth of teams in that conference.
Yeah, whoever's making the schedule for Bluefield, I think you need to sit down at the end of the season and re-examine some things, because it's been a challenge for them. They're having difficulty getting that first win, and it seems like every week now they're running up against the juggernaut, and it's really difficult for them. We saw them, they put some points up on the board 2 weeks ago. Last week, they got kind of blown out, but one of these days they gotta get the win for pride's sake. For these guys go out and they work so hard all season long, and if you're a college football player, you have a lot of pride. You work so hard for it. You never want to go winless in a season. So hopefully, if not this week, one of the weeks soon after, they can go out there and get that first win and really grind it out.
Absolutely. Bluefield will look to do that at Georgetown College. Then they'll have a bye week on the 15th, and then they're back home on the 22nd against Cincinnati Christian. Again, West Virginia, we've mentioned it again, they are 4-0. They have broken into the top 25 as a result of their win over Kansas State in kind of a complete 180 of what happened when they met in the Little Apple last year when West Virginia got out to a big lead. Kansas State rallied to win by 1, and those are typically the types of games Kansas State has won under Bill Snyder, but this year it was West Virginia who was able to get the job done.
Yeah, I mean, that's so huge for their confidence, especially Skylar Howard. He was talking about after the game, the motivation to beat Kansas State, the one team he hadn't beat here in his West Virginia career, and down the stretch, he played so well, leading that comeback charge and getting the touchdown in the end to push them out in front and get the lead. So that's huge for their confidence. It's really too bad they have to have a bye week now because, when you're playing that well and you get a big momentum gaining win like that, you want to keep on rolling. And, now they're going to take a step back and kind of evaluate where they're at and get some rest, which is good. But when you're playing that well, a lot of times you want to just keep on rolling on. But overall, the Mountaineers are in a fantastic position this year. They've played really well on both sides of the ball. And, the big question mark heading into the season was, how is this young defense going to do? They lost several guys from last year's team, kind of an unproven secondary, and so far, they've done a pretty good job.
They really have. They limited the Wildcats to only 1 touchdown and 3 field goals from Matthew McCrane, who I had a chance to take a look at the replay of the game. That potential game-winning field goal, as it turned out, was not that close. I thought it was closer only because I was on the side where the field goal was actually attempted, the whole perspective. But again, next week, the Mountaineers are on the road at Lubbock, Texas, their first true road game of the year. They'll take on the Red Raiders, a reunion. Dana Holgerson, who used to coach Cliff Kingsbury when Kingsbury was the Red Raiders quarterback. So that's going to be a nice reunion. And Patrick Mahomes, you talk about the riches the Big 12 has at quarterback. Skylar Howard, Baker Mayfield, certainly Patrick Mahomes is in that category as well at Texas Tech. Shane Buechele from Texas as well has worked his way into the conversation. But moving on to high school football now, we are into the second half of the season. We've seen some great performances, and we're going to have some great matchups this week, including our Northside Chevy Game of the Week. It will be Summers County. They are 7th in Class Single A on the road at Independence, which is 11th in Class AA. I had a chance to see this game last year at Summers County. First off, the weather was absolutely horrible. It was downpouring, it was muddy, it was puddles all over the field. We are hopeful that it's not going to be quite that bad come this Friday night.
Yeah, the forecast is looking a lot better. One of the last warm nights, I think, before we finally start to cool off. So that'll be nice to see one more good Friday of high school football before it starts to get into the cold, chilly fall months. And, hopefully we stay dry. And we should have a good game of football between, two teams that have really been outstanding this year.
Yeah, and we don't mind the cold. I mean, we can always
bundle up.
We can always add layers.
Just keep it dry.
Yeah, that's our big request. If it's dry, we're happy. But another game that definitely merits worth mentioning as well: undefeated Fayetteville and undefeated Nicholas County. If you see our weekly picks in the Beckley Register-Herald every Friday on who we pick, I think every one of us picked James Monroe to beat Nicholas County last week in Linside, and that just shows the testament of how Nicholas County was able to respond to adversity, A, giving up their first points of the season to the Mavericks, who are normally a high-scoring team, and then B, coming from behind to win by 16 on the road.
Well, yeah, and they were down in that game. It was 9-6 at one point there in the first half, and from that point on, the defense really just bared down and said, we're not giving up another point, and they went on to win 25-9. So that speaks to the character of this team, the mentality to just go out and really bear down in a tough situation against a team that has been putting up points all year long in all kinds of ways in James Monroe. They've really been an offensive juggernaut, and Nicholas County shut them down. Really, for the first quarter and a half, I mean, the defense on both sides was outstanding. Nobody was able to move the ball, and then finally Nicholas was able to break through. It seems like, once they get that first Tate Mays to Carter Siebert Sweeney, long completion that really opens things up for them, and that certainly was the case there. And so now they go to take on a Fayetteville team, which, they're an offensive juggernaut in their own. Granted, they haven't played probably the same quality of opponents. So this will be a huge test for Fayetteville, for Will Fenton, for Dalton Dempsey and those guys to see how they stack up against that Nicholas County defense. Personally, I think Nicholas County is just too strong of a team all across the board. They have more depth than Fayetteville, and they're a slightly bigger school. So I personally see Nicholas County winning that game, but I hope that Will Fenton can go out there and really make some noise and make this a competitive matchup.
Absolutely. James Monroe, by the way, is at home this week to Westside. It's been a tough couple weeks for the Renegades after a great start to the season for them, opening with the big win against Liberty. They past few weeks haven't gone the way they were hoping for, but they were actually in the top 16 when the first SSAC rankings came out. That is no longer the case. One other team that is also in the SSAC rankings is Princeton. They were coming off a bye week. They will be at home against Oak Hill. And again, it's the success of Zach Stanifer on the ground for the Tigers.
Yeah, I mean, sometimes it's almost boring to watch because they get that first half lead, and then the second half, all they do is just Zach Stanifer up the middle, Zach Stanifer up, and they just grind that defense down. And it really, not only does it wear the defense out, but it takes so much time off the clock when they do that, because oftentimes it's not, 10 yards and a first down, clock stops. It's 3 yards, 40 seconds off the clock, 3 yards, 40 seconds, and then they get the first down. And they just slowly inch down the field like that. And it makes it so hard when you're in a deficit to come back against that, especially because their defense is pretty strong as well. So it's not like you can just air it out and put points up on the board real quickly and try to get yourself back in the game. And especially for an Oak Hill team that has struggled this season, struggled offensively, to go into an atmosphere like Princeton. They always have such a good home crowd, and under the lights, on the turf and everything, it can be a little intimidating. So I think a real tough matchup for Oak Hill, and I think the game that Princeton should handle fairly easily.
Yeah, talking about teams on a roll, the guy you mentioned as our Athlete of the Week this past week, Seattle Tony Tire Pros Athlete of the Week, Jaron Bragg from Shady Spring. A fine job as always on that package.
Thank you.
They are on a roll themselves. A win over Pikeview 2 weeks ago, a win over Oak Hill last week, and this week they are on the road at Lincoln County, a team that is also still looking for their first win, a game that on paper Shady Spring would be able to win and continue this momentum they've started the last couple weeks.
Yeah, what really impressed me about that Tigers team is they started out 0-4, which is always, that can be demoralizing to a lot of teams, but they've maintained a high level of confidence throughout that process and a belief in themselves that they would eventually right the ship and get things moving. And talking to those players, they always felt it was just a case of, all right, we got to grind through these tough games at the beginning of the season, Independence and Princeton, some of these tougher schools, and now their schedule opens up a little bit and gets a little bit easier for them. They won their homecoming game against Pikeview. They were able to go into Oak Hill and ruin their homecoming game, something that Shade White talked about when I interviewed him. He was, they were really motivated to go out and do that, and now they got another chance to make it 3 in a row against Lincoln County. So they still, as unlikely as it might seem with 4 losses, they still have their eyes on the playoffs. They really believe that they can right the ship and get all the way back. So, must continues to be a must-win game for them, but they're in a good spot to do it once again.
Absolutely. We saw, well, you and I were both not here 2 years ago, but a team like Wyoming East, for example, I think they lost their first 3 or 4 games in 2014, but they were able to get into the playoffs themselves. We might see that potentially happen with Shady Spring if the stars can align for them. But great week of high school football lined up, as well as college football. But also coming to the end of the regular seasons for both high school volleyball and for high school soccer. I know you haven't had a chance to see a ton of soccer or volleyball, but there are certainly teams that are standing out and making their presences known in terms of contention for a state title. Yeah,
well, the Oak Hill boys, I got to cover them a few weeks back for the Team of the Week package. They've had just an outstanding year, and it's really interesting to see. This is obviously a football-dominated area, but they have a really strong soccer culture there, and their coach, Cliff Sullivan, he's so passionate about the sport down there, and the boys on that team, they all love soccer so much, and they play as such a cohesive unit. They really all care about each other, and they go out and they play for each other, and they're just always all about soccer all the time. They're watching videos of the Premier League. They're constantly training. They're worried about nutrition. They're doing CrossFit. They're doing all these things to improve themselves, and they're really focused on getting to the state tournament this year. And they got off to an outstanding start to the season, and now they're looking to wrap things up strong and as one of the top teams in the state, hopefully make some noise. It'd be nice to see them get somewhere.
Absolutely. It's one of those where you talk about little things making the difference, them adding up. And I would absolutely agree with you. That's the thing that's making the difference for Oak Hill this year. Moving on to high school volleyball, we've been able to see a couple of teams in action. I know Fayetteville has done very well. They came close to making the state tournament last year, and I think they have a lot of confidence that they're able to make it to Charleston this summer or this season. Coming up this weekend will be the Coalfield Conference Tournament. The Class Single A tournament will be at Greenbrier West. The Class AA tournament will be at Independence. And I think AA especially will be wide open because for a while, for several years, Pikeview was kind of the strong team in terms of talent and overall depth. But last year was a senior year for a lot of those players. Madison May, Audrey Higgins, they've now all graduated. And I think AA would be wide open. But in terms from what you have seen, just looking at the volleyball highlights that we've been able to accumulate, who has stood out to you in particular?
I haven't seen too much, but I mean, like you said, Pikeview is always a good team. Fayetteville's looked really good with Kendall Millay and some of those girls there. I mean, they seem to be strong in whatever sport they play, whether it's basketball, softball, or volleyball.
And that's both boys and girls.
Right.
I mean, you talk about Fenton and Dalton Dempsey.
So I mean, you've got good teams across the board. I mean, it's tough to say, anything can happen in these tournaments situations, but looking forward to it. I'll get to cover some of that on Saturday, so it'll be fun.
Yeah, Meadowbridge, I should also mention girls volleyball. They have looked very impressive. I've gotten to see them win twice now against Oak Hill. Oak Hill, it's just been a tough volleyball year for them, but they do have a lot of young players. I was at Fayetteville Senior Night, which Oak Hill was a part of in the Triangular, and Oak Hill does not have any seniors, so you hope everyone comes back. You hope everyone is 100% for 2017. We would love to see the Lady Red Devils competing for a state championship next year, perhaps.
Yeah, and shout out to their coach. She was actually my tour guide for a rafting trip I did a while back, so hopefully they'll turn things around.
Absolutely. Well, final thoughts and bringing it home. It is Week 5 of the NFL. It will be an important week for you, Tom, the return of a certain quarterback
I cannot
who
wait.
17 years ago led Michigan to Ohio State, to a win over Ohio State. I still haven't forgiven him, but his 4-game suspension is finally over, and it couldn't come soon enough after how they did last week against Buffalo.
Yes, the injustice is over, and now the reign of terror on the National Football League begins, and it couldn't start with a better opponent against the Cleveland Browns, one of the worst defenses in the league, starting a third-string quarterback, a rookie out of USC, and Tom Brady. It's a road matchup, but even on the road, the Patriots are laying 11.5 points to the Cleveland Browns. That just goes to show you how big of a blowout people expect this game to be. And certainly we would expect that they're going to come out throwing, and they won't do what most teams typically do when they get a sustained lead and try to run the ball and try to kill the clock off. The Patriots do this often, but I think especially in this first game, Tom Brady's first game back, he is super motivated. I think they're going to keep throwing throughout the whole game. We might see record numbers of points put up on the board this weekend.
Absolutely. I just personally, from a neutral standpoint, would love to see Terrell Pryor do well because he's had a respectable couple weeks. Pryor has with the Browns.
Yeah, and you know what? I think he will have a good game because what the Patriots typically do is they put Logan Ryan, their second cornerback, on the more physical wide receiver, and they let Malcolm Butler take the faster guy. So most likely it's going to be Malcolm Butler matching up against Andrew Hawkins. So we don't expect a big game out of Hawkins. But Terrell Pryor, especially in a matchup where Cleveland's going to be down, they're going to be throwing against Logan Ryan, who is a corner who can be taken advantage of. We saw that going back to the Super Bowl where Chris Matthews, an unheard of receiver on the Seahawks, came in and had a 100-yard receiving game. So Logan Ryan, he's really good at times, but also he's a beatable guy, and we just saw Pryor have a great game against Josh Norman. The week before that, he had an outstanding game. So he could be in a position to put up some big numbers out there for you fantasy owners.
Yeah, other games going on in the NFL. I know the Broncos still looking to stay undefeated. I know the Vikings off to a very great start. And trying to remember who the Falcons are facing this week, but
it's the Broncos.
It is the Broncos. Oh.
So the Falcons coming off of that huge home win against Carolina where Matt Ryan and Julio Jones just absolutely went off.
I have Julio Jones on my fantasy team.
Yeah, and we're playing each other this week.
Yes, we are playing each other this week.
So this is a perfect chance for me because Julio Jones will most likely come back down to earth facing this Broncos secondary in Denver. Always a tough atmosphere to play in with the altitude and just the passion the fans have. And the Broncos defense just as good as it was last year, if not better. Not quite sure who will be playing quarterback for them this weekend. Trevor Siemian got banged up in that game. Mm-hmm. We saw little Paxton Lynch come in, the rookie out of Memphis. So we're not sure if we're going to see him or if we're going to see Siemian. I think either way, Lynch looked good when he came in, and the Broncos defense has made it seem like it doesn't really matter who they play at quarterback. They can get it done with the run game and with Von Miller and that secondary.
No, I definitely have a decision to make myself because I not only have Jones right now starting. As of this moment, I have the Broncos defense starting. I may or may not switch them with the Packers, depending on my gut feelings over the weekend.
Yeah.
But glad it's a Sunday game, so I have a couple days to figure that out.
Yeah, that's a tough one, man. It's always a tough one.
But that will wrap up this week. Any final thoughts for you?
I'm just looking forward to it, man. Baseball playoffs, NFL rolling along, college. It's such a good time of the year for sports. I mean, people talk about June because all the championships happening and whatnot, but the NHL will get rolling pretty soon here. The NBA towards the end of the month, and we're in the full swing of it now. The fall, it's a great time for it.
Yeah, I think next week definitely encourage you to wear your Bruins sweater if you have one, or any Bruins apparel. I'll be
breaking that out.
Probably my Blue Jackets sweater as we look to our first full year under John Tortorella, and I think we can say with full confidence that it will be the Blue Jackets and Nick Foligno hoisting Lord Stanley's Cup.
It's a bold prediction, folks. It's a real bold prediction.
Call it bold, but call it homerism, but it is what it is. I think Tortorella was the right guy for the job. They were just in such a bad mood at the beginning of last year that even after they fired Todd Richards, they never really could get it right back on track to where they were seriously contending for a playoff spot like they were the past 2 years. So I think Tortorella was the right man for the job. They hadn't had a captain for a good 2-3 years until they named Foligno. But I think Foligno, if anyone, has shown he's up to the task. And the big thing also is injuries. I mean, guys like Ryan Murray, Brandon Saad, Seth Jones, who was a great acquisition. I didn't know.
Terrific young defenseman.
I didn't know much about him at the time when he was traded to Columbus from Nashville in exchange for Ryan Johansson. But what he showed the second half of the season, he really stepped up for the Blue Jackets. And I think he could be a breakout star, pretty much to the level of a Johansson or a Boone Jenner.
Yeah, his dad played in the NBA, too.
That's right, yeah. And also, I mean, the Bruins stars, I mean, how many have they had over the years?
Well, they've been good, going back a few years. Right now, I think they're kind of in a rough spot. I don't really know what to expect out of the Bruins this season. They missed the playoffs each of the last 2 seasons. They haven't done too much as far as improving their defensive unit, which I think is a big thing. Zdeno Chara, another year older. He played in the World Cup already, so he's already got some minutes under his belt. Not what you want to see for a 39-year-old defenseman who's been slowing down each of the last several years. But they did do some good things. They brought in David Backes from the Blues. I think he's a terrific two-way player. He's the type of guy that really fits into the Bruins system as far as being physical, playing both ways. They still don't quite have that top-of-the-line scorer. They re-signed Brad Marchand. The year before they re-signed Patrice Bergeron, so those two will be together for a while. We saw them win the gold medal or I guess the World Cup championship, whatever you want to call it. So saw them do that together. They're playing on a line with Sidney Crosby. They looked really good. So I'm expecting big things out of those guys. But overall, I just don't know that the Bruins have the firepower to get into the playoffs and really make any noise. As for the Blue Jackets, John Tortorella, I think he's a great hire. He's someone that always comes in and he lights a fire under his team and really motivates them to play well. We've seen how a couple years down the road that doesn't always work out so favorably. Some of the players stop responding to that type of motivation, but at least in the short term, it can be a great way to boost the team up and get them going. So hopefully we'll see some good things out of Columbus for that.
Yeah, I just remember when I heard the news that Tortorella was indeed hired, then several weeks later I was talking with my parents, and they were aware that there was a coaching change, but they didn't know who Tortorella was. So as I was showing my mom clips of famous Tortorella-isms, and her reaction was, that's the Blue Jackets' new coach?
Team USA in the World Cup, too.
That is very true. But, we'll mention that some more as the season draws closer to kicking off, or the puck dropping, so to speak, more appropriate hockey pun. But it's going to be a great year in the NHL, I think. And that will do it for this week of the Change-Up. Be sure to follow us on our Twitter and Facebook pages at SportsWOAY, and our personal Twitter pages. I'm at DigbyMatt. He's at TomBealWOAY. Special shout out to the great music we've had on this episode.
Yes, my man John Canada, Gritty City Records out of Richmond, Virginia. He was a friend of mine growing up, and he's producing some incredible beats. He's with a record label now. Some guys they're making some cool music, so check them out on SoundCloud if you get a chance. John Canada and Gritty City Records.
And he's been giving us great music ever since we started this. I think we're now up to week 12 or episode 12 of the podcast.
Yeah, man, rolling along.
Absolutely.
It's been a lot of fun.
Well, we'll have more local sports to talk to you next week. In addition to the NHL, we will be wearing our NHL apparel, and Getting excited for the start of the National Hockey League season. But until then, for Tom Beal, I'm Matt Digby. You've been listening to The Change Up. Thanks for watching. We'll see you next week.
Go Sox.